They said it was too big, too dangerous, too powerful to survive. But what if the truth was darker? What if this engine wasn't just born to win races, but born from betrayal, politics, and backroom deals where rule books could be bent or buried? For a few short years in the 1960s, one motor turned American racing into a battlefield. It ruled NASCAR's high banks. It crushed Ferrari at Le Mans. And it struck so much fear into rivals that officials tried to erase it from history. This wasn't an engine built for comfort. It wasn't built for ordinary drivers. It wasn't even built to last. It was built for one purpose: to dominate, at any cost. Its name? The Ford 427 side oiler, the outlaw engine that rewrote the rules of American performance. In the mid-20th century, America was obsessed with horsepower. Post-war optimism collided with industrial power, and Detroit became the epicenter of speed. Chevrolet, Chrysler, and Ford, the Big Three, weren't just car companies. They were nations within a nation, each waging its own war for dominance. Chevy had the 409, a street legend that made teenagers dream of drag strips. Chrysler had its Hemi, brute force monsters born from aviation technology. And Ford, well, Ford was behind. By the late 1950s, Henry Ford II, grandson of the founder, was tired of losing. Losing on the track, losing on the street, and most painfully, losing in the boardroom. Chevy was outselling Ford. Chrysler was stealing headlines. And in racing, the theater of speed, Ford's engines were either underpowered or unreliable. But Henry Ford II had money. He had pride. And he had something more dangerous, a grudge. Because in 1963, Ford tried to buy Ferrari. Yes, Ferrari. The deal was nearly done, until Enzo Ferrari, the stubborn Italian, walked away at the last second. He didn't want Ford meddling in his racing program. Henry Ford II never forgave him, and that betrayal would set the stage for one of the greatest revenge stories in automotive history. But first, Ford needed an engine. Not just any engine, a weapon. In 1958, Ford introduced something called the FE engine family. FE stood for Ford Edsel, though some insiders joked it meant Ford Experimental. It was a big block V8, meant to power everything from family sedans to pickup trucks. Displacements range from 332 to 428 cubic inches. It was versatile, durable, and heavy. At first, the FE didn't scare anyone. It was reliable, yes. But exciting? Not really. By the early 60s, however, Ford engineers saw potential. They realized the FI could be pushed to its limits. Cross-bolted mains, high-flow heads, better oiling. Ford's racing division, still small compared to Chevy's, began experimenting. The early 390 FIE gained traction in NASCAR, but when Chrysler's Hemi showed up, the 390 looked like a toy. Ford doubled down. The displacement grew to 406, then 427 cubic inches. The number wasn't random, it was calculated, because NASCAR's rulebook capped engines at 427 cubic inches. Ford was playing chess, not checkers. But there was a problem. The first version of the 427, the top oiler, had a critical weakness. Oil fed the camshaft first, then trickled down to the crank. At high RPMs, under race stress, bearings starved. Engines failed. Races were lost. For Ford, failure wasn't an option. Henry Ford II had issued a directive: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Every engine failure wasn't just a broken part, it was a humiliation. So in secret, engineers redesigned the oiling system. They created what became known as the side oiler. Instead of sending oil to the cam first, it sent it straight to the crank. The lifeblood of the engine went where it mattered most. It was radical. It was simple. It worked. The 427 side oiler was born. By 1964, NASCAR had become the most brutal testing ground for engines. Races weren't just contests of speed, they were wars of attrition. And Ford was desperate. Chevy's 409 was still feared on the street, but in NASCAR it was losing ground. Chrysler's 426 Hemi, however, that was another story. It was unstoppable. Massive valves, hemispherical chambers, brute strength. The Hemi was rewriting the record books. Ford couldn't let that stand. So the side oiler went to battle, built with thick cylinder walls, cross-bolted mains that looked like aviation engineering, high RPM durability no Ford engine had ever seen before. On the dyno, it was rated at 425 horsepower. On the track and race trim, it made closer to 600. Numbers that made NASCAR officials nervous. Because here's the dirty secret about NASCAR. It wasn't just about racing. It was about politics, about money, about control. Bill France, the iron-fisted head of NASCAR, knew he had to keep the big three balanced. If one manufacturer dominated, the others might leave. And if they left, NASCAR would die. So France played favorites. He adjusted rules, weight penalties, carburetor restrictions, whatever it took to keep things fair. But to Ford, it felt like sabotage. Every time the side oilers showed dominance, the rulebook seemed to change. Still, the engine proved itself. The Ford Galaxies thundered around Daytona, Charlotte, Talladega. Drivers like Fred Lorenzen, Fireball Roberts, and Junior Johnson became legends behind it, and every victory was a middle finger to Chrysler and Chevy. By 1965, NASCAR's stock cars were anything but. Engines were hand-built. Cars were lightweight shells. The connection to showroom models was thin, but the illusion was what sold cars. Ford leaned into the illusion. They built just enough side oiler-equipped cars to qualify as production. The rest went to race teams. Behind the scenes, Ford's racing program became a shadow government within the company. Engines disappeared from inventory. Prototype parts were tested in secrecy. Stories circulated of engineers pulling all-nighters, only to have engines destroyed the next day, so no one outside could copy them. The side oiler wasn't just an engine. It was a weapon in a shadow war. But the biggest war wasn't in NASCAR. It was across the Atlantic. The 427 side oiler dominated stock car ovals, but it also created paranoia. Rivals whispered that Ford's engines weren't really stock, that they were hand-picked, blueprinted, even illegal. NASCAR officials tightened inspections. Rule changes piled up. Ford threatened to pull out of NASCAR altogether, but the fans didn't care. They came to see the violence. The Galaxies roaring at 7,000 RPM, the ground shaking, engines screaming, cars trading paint until something broke. And often, it was the drivers who broke. Crashes at 180 miles per hour weren't survivable. The side oiler wasn't just feared for its power. It was feared because it pushed cars and men beyond their limits. While NASCAR burned, Ford's real revenge was brewing in Europe. The Le Mans 24 Hours. Ferrari's home turf. The race Henry Ford II had sworn to conquer after Enzo's betrayal. The weapon? The GT40. A low, wide, menacing car that needed a heart strong enough to survive 24 hours at redline. The choice was obvious, the 427 side oiler. In 1966, it happened. Ford entered 4 GT40s at Le Mans. Ferrari entered its best. For 24 hours, the two clashed in the French countryside. And when the dust settled, Ford didn't just win. They humiliated Ferrari. A 1-2-3 sweep. The side oiler wasn't just a NASCAR weapon anymore. It was a global legend. But Ford wasn't done experimenting. In secret, they built something even more radical. The 427 SOHC Cammer. It had overhead cams, exotic timing chains, 6 feet long, a design so advanced it terrified NASCAR. On the drag strip, it was unstoppable. The Cammer made over 600 horsepower out of the box. With tuning, it made 700, even 800. NASCAR's response? They banned it before it ever turned a wheel. The Cammer became a legend of what could have been. But its outlaw child, the side oiler, kept fighting. Ask the men who drove it, and they'll tell you the same thing. The 427 wasn't just power. It was violence. Fred Lorenzen called it a beast you had to wrestle. Others said it was like driving with a time bomb under the hood. When it held together, it won races. When it broke catastrophically. Engines blew. Cars caught fire. Drivers walked away or didn't. The side oiler demanded respect, and it got it. By the late 1960s, the world changed. Insurance companies cracked down on high-horsepower cars. The government introduced emission standards. Gas prices crept upward. The side oiler was too expensive, too brutal, too thirsty. It faded from showrooms. It lived on in racing, but its glory days were numbered. By 1970, the 427 was gone, replaced by softer, detuned engines. The golden age was over. But legends don't die. The side oiler became a holy grail. Collectors hunted them. Engines pulled from race cars sold for fortunes. Stories of secret aluminum blocks, experimental heads, hidden prototypes kept the myth alive. At auctions, genuine 427-powered Cobras and GT40s sell for millions. Barn finds spark bidding wars, and enthusiasts still whisper about the what-ifs. What if NASCAR hadn't played politics? What if the Cammer had raced? What if Ford had kept building the 427 into the 70s? We'll never know. But one thing is certain. The Ford 427 side oiler wasn't just an engine. It was a statement. A weapon forged out of desperation, revenge, and pride. An engine so feared, NASCAR had to bury it. And so powerful, it still haunts the shadows of racing history. Engines come and go, but some, the rare few, transcend time. Ford's 427 wasn't meant to last forever. It wasn't built for comfort, or efficiency, or even survival. It was built for one thing: victory, and in that mission, it succeeded. But here's the question. What if NASCAR hadn't buried it? What if Ford had unleashed the Cammer on the oval? What if this brutal V8 had been allowed to evolve into the 1970s and beyond? Would the history of horsepower look different? Would Detroit's wars have lasted longer? We'll never know. But one thing's certain, the legend of Ford's 427 still rumbles in the shadows of racing history. And if you want more untold stories of engines built to defy time, make sure to like this video and also subscribe for more Gearhead content.